What's up, everybody? Welcome to the season finale of Mets Off Day Live. I'm your host, Chelsea Sherrod, and joining us today are former Mets GM Jim Duquette and SNY MLB insider Andy Martino. We're going to talk all things Mets over the next half hour, and we'll take some fan questions live as they come in. So make sure you put those in the chat wherever you are watching. But first, welcome to the show, guys. How you doing?
Doing good, Chelsea. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm trying to stay dry.
We're all indoors. I'm semi-indoors. I'm in the back of a press box at Yankee Stadium, so this is helping me stay dry and warm for about 30 to 45 minutes.
You look like you're ready for winter. I got my short sleeves on, Andy. You got your winter coat on.
SNY just issued these new hooded coats to some of us that are on air, like out in the field. I feel like I'm about to coach an NFL game or something. It's really big. I don't know if that's what's coming across, but it's functional for a day like today.
No, absolutely. I see the logo. It's good. It's nice.
There you go.
All right. So before we get into the Mets currently, let's review some of the best off days spent by them this season. So Francisco Lindor attended the U.S. Open with his wife and daughters. Tomas Nido, Luis Guillorme, and Pete Alonso went to Devils Rangers Game 4. Adam Ottavino spent some time in Aspen. Pretty cool. Jeff McNeil played in the New York State Open Golf Championship. Edwin Diaz put his son in the driver's seat of his Lamborghini while in park, of course. And Jose Quintana spent the day with his family at the Museum of Ice Cream. So, Jim, I'll start with you. Which do you consider the best of the best off days this season?
Well, I was trying to look at this and say, how do I best relate? Like, I've been to the U.S. Open, and I love. There's nothing better than to be at the U.S. Open, especially some of the back courts. You know, I know that Francisco was in the prime seats there. You know, it's hard to get those seats. I had them maybe once or twice in my career when I was with the Mets. So I'm going to just kind of tag on what Francisco was able to do with his wife and kids and say, man, that's a pretty good off day, spending it there at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and you're right. Having those like status symbol seats are pretty good too. That's a little flex by Lindor for who he is in New York City sports. I like that. I don't know though. Aspen, it's pretty good. I like tennis, but a day in Aspen doesn't sound so bad either.
No, I'll definitely take that. I will also take Edwin Diaz's Lamborghini too, if he wants to pass that over to me. All right, guys. So where the Mets? Thank you so much, Andy. All right, so where the Mets stand since their last off day, they've gone 7-10 and have been mathematically eliminated from the postseason. So, Andy, I'll start with you. Do you have any positive notes to share from the Mets' last 13 games?
Sure. I think Ronny Mauricio has been intriguing. I know we're going to get it in more depth, the young players later, but I think in a lot of ways, unfortunately for the Mets, you can sort of cross off the idea of Beatty and Vientos becoming impact defenders at third base probably. And Mauricio, the jury's still out. He's a shortstop. He's athletic. I don't know if he's going to hit enough for a full season of being an everyday player, but I'm very intrigued by what I see there so far. That's been probably the most dynamic debut the Mets have had from a young player. I know he didn't debut within the past 13 days, but that's something continually to feel pretty good about. And Senga and Quintana continue to be solid. I don't think you want Quintana at the top of the rotation next year, but the idea that you can rely on him next year is definitely a good thing. And the fact that Diaz is not going to pitch this year, but is pretty much himself, it seems, health-wise, going into the offseason. So, yeah, there's been for sure positives.
All right. What are your takeaways, Jim?
You know, yeah, I'll tag on to I mean, a couple of those, definitely stand out. For me, seeing the power that Vientos has shown this month has been encouraging, not just the last, 2.5 weeks, but maybe even this month of September. And, trying to determine what position or where he's going to bat, how many at bats. Like for me, he's still kind of deciding on that, but I thought he has performed well along with Mauricio to some degree. But I think primarily, outside of the veterans who you kind of expected to do well in September, the pitching for me is what stood out. So, Andy started talking about Senga, we're in uncharted territory for Senga in terms of workloads, and he's gotten better as the season has gone on. And I think that's the thing, kind of impressive to look forward to for next year is it's something that you build on this season. As much as this season has been a bust, there are certain things individually that you look at least from the front office side, say, all right, boy, if Senga can be counted on for maybe 200 innings last year when you really weren't thinking he'd be close to that this year, that'd be a huge boost. He mentioned Quintana, and I love what we've seen out of Quintana. He's just got to stay healthy. But, even guys like McNeil has pitched well. Gott has had a good month. Trevor Gott, like some of these individual guys, you're like, okay, you know what? You can put your stamp on a couple of those guys. Budo has pitched well enough to maybe factor into the bullpen for me. So I think that those are some of those things that, you kind of look at, the last 2.5 weeks or even this month and say, all right, I feel pretty good about, some of these guys. And it's something that you can kind of maybe use as some kind of certainty when you're trying to build out the roster in the winter.
Yeah, it's been a really good opportunity for these guys to continue to develop. So that's been a really great thing. One big acquisition that the Mets have had recently off the field is that they've announced that they're bringing in Brewers president of baseball operations, David Stearns, to be their first ever president of baseball ops. And that's news that Andy broke for us. So Jim, I'll start with you. How do you see this impacting the role of Billy Epler, and what do you expect their dynamic to be like?
Well, I think with the way that they're going to work together, I mean that's responsibilities and the duties, right? And I think that they've been a little short-handed, and I know they've gone through several different iterations of the general managers over the last couple of years, but to have a head of that department now that Sandy Alderson has kind of taken the step back that he's had, and Billy working together, you can equally divide up that role a little bit more easily and assign duties to each. I think with David in particular, I think his style fits well. Understanding the market, obviously, Billy's got a year under his belt, but he was up there in New York under Brian Cashman. The two of them understand the market. They understand, how important it is to win there. Like there's a lot of things that kind of come with that job that aren't in other jobs. Like, in Milwaukee, the winning is certainly a priority, but you're not dealing with anywhere near the expectation level. You're not dealing with anywhere near the payroll level, the fan base, all of it. It's one of the smallest markets in the sport. So I think the combined, anything that David doesn't know about the team, Billy can get him up to speed on, so make that seamless transition where, Billy was coming in and he had to get to know the entire front office. He didn't have a ton of people that he knew already there. He brought some guys with him, but it was a big learning curve for him. That learning curve for David Stearns should be a lot smaller because he's got somebody that he knows and he trusts in Epler. I think then the two of them can hit the ground running, trying to improve the roster, because this roster is definitely really, really short from being a competitive team next year. And I think the sooner they can get going on that, the better.
Yeah, for sure. Andy, do you see Stearns making a decision on Buck Showalter fairly quickly? What do you see?
That's been shrouded in mystery a bit, Chelsea. And as someone who like to think I'm okay at getting information out of that organization, that one's been tough to read. The best I can probably tell you is not that helpful. Is that I'm hearing it's probably like 50-50 at best for Showalter to come back, which is kind of a hedge. But I think that also tells you that it's different from Epler, obviously. I was able to report, as were others, and right immediately at the time of the Stearns news that Epler would be the GM, and we haven't been able to report that about Showalter. Epler and Stearns are not technically allowed to talk about this right now, or call in with Stearns or anybody. I'll choose not to be skeptical about how that works, but technically Stearns is not a Mets employee until October 2nd. He can think about it, of course, and there's some awkward timing here in that his old manager, Craig Counsell, will be a free agent after the season, but Stearns is introduced as the Mets president of baseball on October 2nd, and Milwaukee has to play in October. So how do you do that if you're the Mets without framing it like, we'll take Buck back here if Counsell won't come? I just think it'll be the optics of that and how that plays out for a few weeks could be a little awkward. And technically, of course, Stearns is not allowed to feel out Counsell about that at all. I guess they could talk now. Stearns works for the Brewers today. Maybe he should get on that. But anyway, that's a little tricky. Other than Counsell, really, I kind of struggle to see what the alternatives are. And it's the same thing here at Yankee Stadium, talking about Aaron Boone. Like, the front offices here is like, who's better than Aaron Boone we're going to get? And I think the similar logic could be applied to Showalter. He's not a perfect manager. Nobody is. But he's obviously a brilliant baseball mind. And he was really out there. If this Counsell thing doesn't work out. And I don't watch Craig Counsell day in and day out even enough to say that he'd definitely be an improvement. I know that to be an improvement in game over Buck Showalter is a really high bar. He's just a brilliant baseball guy for whatever else he brings.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a really great point you just made, Andy. So, Andy, what do you think Stearns' first move will be as president of baseball ops then?
He doesn't seem like somebody who needs to come in and make a move. And there isn't anything that needs to be done right away. He's coming in, obviously, at the beginning of October. Free agency is a month away. He's got time to prepare for the GM meetings early the following month. So probably just getting to lay the land, laying groundwork. I would expect there to be some hires. The Mets have a pro scouting director position open. They have player development position open. So just backfilling some very important but not visible jobs is probably going to be really important. Deciding on coaches, talking to Epler to figure that out. Coaches deserve to be notified as quickly as they can if they're not coming back so they can seek another job. It's not great to let a guy go at the end of October. So those are some of the more urgent things that will be on his plate.
Yeah. What do you think, Jim? What do you think his first move would be?
Well, I think that settling the manager's position has to be the priority number one. And I think, to Andy's point, if he has somebody in mind like a Craig Counsell, it is a tough transition while they're in the postseason. Now, I had a conversation with Matt Arnold, the general manager of the Milwaukee Brewers, just yesterday about Counsell's position because he is a free agent at the end of the year. They have had an understanding that they won't even talk about it until after the season is over. There's been a lot of conversation that Counsell wants to take the year off and leave. So that would be, certainly would be, and if he wanted to come to New York, he's got a guy that he trusts and knows in David Stearns. Sometimes, guys are reluctant to move to a different area because they don't know anybody else, but because he trusts David, that might be a natural transition. So, if they did make a change, Craig Counsell would absolutely be that number one choice, be worth waiting for. He's an excellent in-game manager when it comes to handling the bullpen and those type of things, and has had a great understanding relationship of the young players that the Brewers have had, which is something that the Mets are trying to do, have kind of that blended role of incorporating young players in the major league level with some veterans. So he would be, I think, for me, the number one choice. Again, if they did something with Buck, I think Andy's point is a good one, though. Coming in, you could very easily see him, David Stearns, saying, "I want to evaluate myself the job and role of the manager for a year." I know Billy Epler's had a chance to talk to him and had a relationship with him, but for me, I need to put my eyes on it too. That would be fair to me. It'd be fair to Buck, fair to the organization. So I can see the conversation on both sides of it, at least from the front office perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, we'll see how quickly things get off and running for David Stearns. All right, guys, it's time for One Word and Wise season finale edition. So with the 2023 season coming to an end, let's take a closer look at a couple of the Mets' key position players. We will evaluate the following players' season with one word and why. Andy, I'll start with you. The first player up is Francisco Lindor.
I'm going to say leader for Francisco Lindor, and I wouldn't have necessarily said that in 2021. He had obviously a bumpy transition into New York. I feel like I really watched this guy mature as a person within the New York baseball market, to somebody who could be a little defensive, openly complain about fans booing and whatnot. And now he's really, this year, honestly, he's been everything that a team could ask for in a face of the franchise, and that he's accountable and civil with the media when things are going bad. He's very available. He is cares about his teammates. He plays every day. That's a really important thing too, just leading by example. Team's out of it. Showalter compliments both Lindor and Alonzo for just getting out there every day. There are plenty of players that find a reason to go on the IL once the season's basically over, and Lindor and Alonzo, they just haven't done that. So I just think that he went from being a young player trying to be the face of a franchise to, when he got here, to a guy who, watching day in and day out, I legitimately think, hey, they're lucky to have this guy. He's a leader.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Jim, what do you think, Francisco Lindor?
The word that came to my mind was something similar to what Andy said, but it was accountable. And in this market, yeah, when you're not playing well and losing the way they did, and having way below what the expectation level is, there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on, and there's not a lot of accountability that's taken on the player side of things. And I think for one that Francisco was at his locker, it seemed like any night you needed him, good or bad.
Yeah.
And he's had a really good season, impressive season. I almost went with impressive season, but I think accountable to me stands out more because of the fact that accountable, just accountable. That's all I'm doing. Because of the fact that he was willing to answer Andy's tough questions and everyone else's tough questions and be by his locker on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that was huge, especially being around so many young guys too after the trade deadline and everything. I think that leadership and accountability has been huge for them to see. All right, up next, Jeff McNeil. Jim, do you have a word for Jeff?
I'm consistent with him. He's just I think overall, when you look at him and his ability to manipulate the bat and put the ball in play, and be able to do it at a high level, but play different multiple positions. He gives you a consistent day effort and a consistent at bat and a consistent production. Now, this is 2 of the last 3 years that he's been at this high level. He didn't win a batting title, but he's going to be close to. I think he's going to be close to 300. When it's all said and done, and that's not easy to do in this day and age with how good and dominating the pitching is. So, I think with McNeil. Consistent was the word that stood out to me.
All right, Andy?
I'm going to go with athlete or athletic because the fact that this guy can play a borderline Gold Glove second base, as we know, he's been a pretty good corner outfielder for a while, and now he started 2 games at center field this year. That's remarkable. These are different positions that require different preparation, different knowledge of. I mean, there are little things. I was talking to McNeil and Nimmo last homestand when McNeil started the center for the first time. It's like things that we don't think of or even see, but that they have to pay attention to the spin of the ball off the bat, the angles to take to a route, where you are in relation to the wall. There's a lot of differences between playing left and center field. There's a reason why most people don't do all of that. And when McNeil's having a down year at the plate, as he is, it's that athleticism that enables him still to be valuable to a team. I mean, when you think about when Mauricio came up, initially he was going to just play second. McNeil's your second baseman. No drama moving to outfield. Okay, great. That's not that easy for most teams. If the Yankees called up a second baseman, they'd be like, well, what the hell do we do with Gleyber Torres? It's not going to be center field, I'll tell you that. So McNeil provides this manager that kind of flexibility that's pretty special.
Yeah, no, for sure. Jim, Andy just brought him up, but Brandon Nimmo, do you have a word for him?
What I have for him was power. The power was, for me, for his career, the home runs are legit. And it's something that he, does every single year is he tries to improve his game year after year, and even sometimes in season. And one of the things that he's been trying to do was hit for more power without losing the ability and the strength that he has, which is his on base, getting on base, command of the strike zone, making good swing decisions. And so, and there was a period where he was, fastballs were eating him up there right after the All-Star break or so in that range. And then all of a sudden he's figured it out again. And so I think for me, moving forward, he's not a big stolen base guy, but he is evolving into a 25 home run guy. And if that's the case, for me, and he can play some center field and obviously move to a corner as he starts to age, that contract is going to age well. And there's a little bit more productivity in his bat with that power than maybe you expected when you signed him there last year.
All right, last one here, coming to you, Andy. I'm actually going to jump ahead. I'm going to ask you about Starling Marte. What's your word for him, and do you see him bouncing back next year?
My word for Starling Marte is, I don't know, ouch, as in how he feels and what kind of season it was. This injury, this double groin surgery, was a really big deal. I remember hearing that all the way going back to when he dropped out of the WBC in February, it might have been late January, and the Dominican team that he was going to play for, what I was hearing around that team was like, this is a really big surgery and a really big health concern. He wanted to play in WBC, couldn't. So the Mets need to be worried about this. And sure enough, he never really seemed to recover this season. I think he's such an impactful hitter that if he can find his way back to health, sure, he can be okay again. It's not like we're seeing signs of slowing down other than his health. Maybe he's not going to be healthy again. I don't know. That's a hard thing to predict. But I think if he's healthy, then yeah, he can be Starling Marte again. But clearly that was a really serious injury and surgery that he had. He never was okay from that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the young guys a little bit. So this season, the Mets saw 4 of their prospects come up to the big league club and make an impact, including their top prospect, Francisco Alvarez, and the prospect fans were clamoring for, Ronny Mauricio. So let's go through each one and determine where you think they fit into the club's big picture 2024 puzzle. So I'll start with you, Jim. Francisco Alvarez, where do you think he fits?
Yeah, I mean, he earned a spot on the club there next year. I know it's been, every other month it's been good and bad, right? He's had, I think, a little bit of inconsistency. He's swung the bat really well. He's been impressive, and he's been way better on the catching side, on the leadership side behind the plate as a catcher. His framing has been way better than I expected. Like that was impactful what we saw out of him in that area. So I think with Alvarez, for me, he's done more than enough. They're going to need his bat in the lineup. So yeah, he definitely proved that he'll be a part of that 24 roster right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Brett Beatty. Oh, sorry.
Oh, we're going.
We're going. Yeah, every other. We're going to go every other here.
But I have things to say about everybody. How will I contain myself?
All right, no, go ahead. Go ahead. What you got to do?
I just think the one thing I would add about Alvarez, Chelsea, is that scouts are a little uncertain that he's going to have enough of an approach as a hitter. The offense is a concern. It's not just the month-to-month thing. It's like with it in and bat, is he a guy that's going to have an approach like Austin Wells does with the Yankees, like on-base kind of guy, takes pitches, close pitches, or is Alvarez going to be a guy that has that power, great elite power tool, but is he swinging from his heels? And is that the kind of hitter he's going to be? And that question has not been answered yet. But great kid, great young leader as a catcher potentially. But there's, I think, questions with the offensive game. Beatty, I mean, not good, obviously. And he would be the first one to tell you. I think you really need defense from third base. I think defense from first and third base is really underrated in the sport. That different teams value it different ways. I know Billy Epler and Buck Showalter certainly value defense at third base. And I just don't see Beatty, for as good as a guy is and as hard as he works, at being rangy and athletic enough to fit the bill there. That's why I complimented Mauricio before. I'd be interested to see. So if he's going to be an unbelievable hitter, then you just deal with the defense. But I just think there's only so far it can go given his body type and basic skill set in terms of being a defender at third. Jim, am I being too harsh?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. And I mean, I probably would say something similar on Beatty. The defense has been below what I expected or hoped. And I think offensively it's been a little more inconsistent than I had hoped too. So I don't think he was able to really convince us that he deserves to be there out of the gate. He's going to have to make a lot of strides this winter.
Yeah. Jim, Mark Vientos.
Vientos, for me, trying to find the right position for him is important. I don't know if we really found that yet. I mean, I think we found it's probably not third base. He could be first base, DH, corner, outfield, which would be fine. But I think that still needs to be found out, with him. He's starting to show some power. He's starting to show some better bats, but I'm not convinced, at the moment that's going to be something that you can have, that you can count on for the whole season. So I think for me, he's a little further advanced on the offensive side than Beatty. And defensively, he's kind of in that same group as Beatty, that a little bit of a lot of uncertainty on where he's going to be, not necessarily third base, but where is he going to be in other places on the diamond.
Last one here for you, Andy, Ronny Mauricio.
Well, like I said, I'm intrigued. We just haven't seen enough on the offensive side. There's been some real concerns about his pitch selectivity. We've seen him make some adjustments. Like there was a game earlier in the year, earlier in the month, when Mauricio looked really bad on a changeup earlier in the game, struck out, and then later in the game stayed back on a changeup and drove it for a home run. He had a changeup that was down his shoelaces in Philly for a home run. So
last night, yeah.
So you take those signs of possible improvement, but like I asked Showalter, how much does this tell you that he's making these adjustments within an at-bat or within a game? And Buck was like, honestly, it's too soon to say, good or bad. Buck obviously doesn't he isn't particularly heaping or generous with his praise of players. He's old school. That's not his style. And he's like, no, it's too soon to say he's going to be good at that skill set. So I don't know yet, but there's like a certain electricity to Mauricio's game where it would be really great for the Mets if he could just have a good enough approach at the plate to hold down his obvious athleticism and defensive skills, power, and all that. I think he's an interesting player.
Yeah, that's the double-edged sword. We were talking about that last night too with Mauricio, his pitch selection and also his aggressiveness at the plate. But yeah, he's really exciting to watch. All right, let's talk Pete Alonso. So Pete Alonso spoke recently about the rumors surrounding a contract extension, saying he's focused on the field for now, but also mentioned how much he loves the city of New York. So Andy, can you give us the latest on Pete Alonso, and do you expect anything to happen quickly once the season ends?
Certainly doesn't seem like they're going to reach an extension agreement, Chelsea. There's a part of this that I'll certainly happy to admit that's going on behind closed doors. It's been very tough to get to. And I thought it was interesting that when the Mets didn't like a particular report about this, that they immediately released a statement via Billy Epler denying it. That always tells you hit a nerve, maybe onto something when a team does that. I'm walking into the gate at a different stadium that day, and I just get a text from Mets PR, like, statement from Billy Epler. This isn't right. Okay. So I just thought that was like, maybe there is something. Maybe the story wasn't exactly what's going on, but maybe there is something going on that just felt like a little bit of a sign. But having said that, they seem like they've been pretty far apart all along, and those things can change in a hurry, and then you have news. But as of the last time I asked anybody, which wasn't that long ago, seemed like Alonzo was more headed to free agency. Mets aren't afraid to do that with their own players. Diaz and Nimmo both went to free agency, and they obviously kept them. DeGrom went to free agency. They didn't reach an agreement, but they don't seem averse. Steve Cohen's confident enough about what he can afford that he doesn't mind free agency rather than an early extension.
Yeah. Jim, how would you go about this if you're David Stearns and Billy Epler with Pete Alonso?
Well, I think that for me, you got a couple different time periods to sign. The beauty, what Andy just said, when a player wanted to stay here with the Mets under this current ownership group, they've been able to keep them. And they were willing to pay at the top of the market or even above the market to keep them. And if you're Pete Alonso, you're going, well, I want to get paid at that level. Well, you're not a free agent yet. If you want to sign for what we're willing to pay you at the moment, we can come up with a deal, whatever that number is. I think you'd want it to be team friendly. I'd want it to be close to, if I were in the front office's shoes, closer to 160 or 180 million. If I'm Pete, I want over 200. It's a pretty big separation in terms of dollars. And so, maybe what the better course is, try to extend it again here to give it one more shot this winter, see if either side has changed their feeling. And then, let Pete go out and prove it again. And, understanding that the risk might be what happened with the Yankees when they offered, Aaron Judge that what looks like a small contract, and what he got later, which was $360 million. That's a huge gap from what they offered him the beginning of the year before his free agency. So, I think that there are a lot of similarities in that. If Pete goes out and has a huge year, you're talking about well north of $200 million that he might get, even as a first baseman, and that might price him out of it. But, in the same sense, this is a guy that loves to be in New York and has produced in New York, and those guys are hard to find. So that's the cautionary tale if the Mets let him become a free agent and he signs somewhere else.
Right, absolutely. That's the risk right there. All right, let's talk about this pitching group. So the Mets pitching staff has a ton of gaps to fill this offseason after trading away Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander from the rotation, along with David Robertson from the bullpen. So Jim, I'll start with you. The veteran pitcher plan obviously didn't work last season. So what do you think the Mets' approach to the rotation should be this offseason?
Well, I think that they don't have to shop at the high end and still be able to compete, right? So they have Senga, who's going to probably step up, and the way he's pitched, I mean, he might end up being their number 2 type. Who knows? He might be their number 1 starter. The way the free agent market might turn. But I think they have a couple of different ways. They definitely need, and they have spoken about. Billy Epler told Andy the same thing. Like they're going to be active on the pitching market, free agent pitching market. I feel like they need at least 2 guys. Doesn't have to be the Blake Snells at the high end, but it could be one of Michael Lorenzen and Jordan Montgomery and some of those guys who will keep them, in the mix, eat up innings, get them close to, stay competitive at the deadline where they can maybe make a trade. So I think it's going to be that level, but they absolutely need those 2. They probably need a little bit more bullpen depth, the optional pitchers to the minor leagues. I don't feel like that really worked overall this year. So they have a couple of those guys, but they need a few more pieces in the bullpen too, including Diaz.
Yeah. So Andy, what's the latest with Yoshinobu, Yamamoto, and other pitchers or any other pitchers the Mets may be looking at?
So what happens next with Yamamoto is they have to be told, the player's agent, Joe Wolf at Wasserman, and then MLB has to be told when the Oryx Buffaloes are going to post Yamamoto. So that's actually not clear yet. It's not known yet what date he will become a free agent or available to be recruited and signed ultimately, because there's a whole posting system that's different. So that's the next step. In the meantime, it's just he's pitching great over there in Japan. And one executive of a New York team told me last week is it's like the winter meetings over here. Like Jed Hoyer, the Cubs GM, was there. Tim Nearing, one of Brian Cashman's top lieutenants, was there. The Mets have a high-level scouting presence at just about all of his starts. So very, very desirable pitcher. There'll be a lot of competition for him. Mets are among the teams that obviously are in on him. One of the things that's going to be interesting there is it's the first time that the Mets and the Yankees really are going to go after potentially the same free agent since Steve Cohen bought the team. And we haven't seen a Mets-Yankees free agent war yet. So that could be a component here that's pretty interesting on the New York side. And as far as the rest of the starting pitching market, I agree with Jim. They're going to have to be more clever than at the top of the market. And I think that's a better place for a team to be anyway. What I like still about the Scherzer and Verlander contracts was how short-term they were. Look at DeGrom. Look at Carlos Rodon. I mean, these long-term contracts for even the best pitchers can be really risky. And I don't think that's what the Mets need to be doing, is locking themselves up to a Blake Snell or somebody. So I think shorter-term deals for mid-tier starting pitchers. And the trick then, it's on your pro scouts and your analytics department to work together to identify the right ones. You're either getting Rick Porcello from 2020 where it doesn't work out, or you're getting Jose Quintana from this year where it does. You got to make the right choices. That's where the real work is for a front office.
All right, let the games begin. All right, guys, wrapping things up here, taking a look ahead to 2025. Around Mets land, the sentiment has been 2024 may not be as competitive, but watch out for 2025. So, Jim, starting with you, what would you say to the fans that are like, I want to win right now?
Well, I think that the Mets have a pathway to win. Certainly, as a wild card team. And listen, the Braves are the clear favorites, but there's a lot of things that happen over the course of a long season. Injuries happen. We've seen teams get injured all the time. Some teams stay healthy, some don't. So I think as long as you're competitive, like we've been hearing out of their front offices and the conversation about having a better pitching staff overall, a little bit deeper bullpen. I think if you start there, you can be competitive. And there's plenty of pathways to have a deep run in the postseason. It doesn't have to be winning the division. In fact, most of the time, those teams who end up with the best record, they don't get there to the end of the World Series. Go back in time to all of just the last 10 years, the World Series champions. The team, I think it might have been the Red Sox, when they won in 2018. They had, I think, the best record in the sport, or one of the best records. They're one of the few that comes to my mind that was at the top of the league, and then ended up running it all the way through to the World Series. So I don't think that the bar is that high for the Mets, where they have to win the division to win the World Series. A lot of times it's who's playing the best at the end. So I would say remain hopeful that they are competitive, and they start with that kind of depth in the pitching overall, which really for me was a huge issue for them, I think, this past year.
Yeah, so Andy, how good can this 2025 Mets team be, in your opinion?
Well, it's tough right now because we just the obvious reason that we don't know the roster yet. We don't know who the manager's going to be. All kinds of variables that are pretty significant. But to Jim's point, it's just about being decent and then hot at the end, and that is about luck and timing. The Arizona Diamondbacks are playing right now a little bit over there on the other side of the wall, and they're not good. And they're in the postseason if the season ends today. So it's a pretty low bar. It's pretty amazing that the Mets and the Yankees didn't clear it this year. That's on the more critical side of the way to look at this. But the more positive way to look at this is the Mets don't have to be that good next year to make the playoffs. You never have to be that good anymore to make the playoffs. And then just time it up with getting hot. So taking a step back and not being a little bit less aggressive in free agency doesn't mean what it used to mean when you have so many teams making the postseason.
All right, well, the Mets will finish up their season with 3 against the Marlins and 3 against the Phillies at home. It's kind of crazy to think that we're in the last week of the season, guys. The summer completely flew by. But how will the both of you spend this last off day of the season? Andy, starting with you.
Well, I think I'm going to do 2 separate tasks for my employer, cover a game and then appear on this. So that doesn't feel like much of an off day, Chelsea, but thank you for asking.
Such a hardworking guy, man.
That's right.
Amazing. Jim, how about you?
He is. I'm going to take the top. I'm going to drive my Lamborghini over to the ice cream museum and combine the 2 things that and again, head over to Aspen, do a little skiing too while we're in it.
Nice.
That's all I got.
Nice. I respect that. Taking some notes from the Mets. I like it. All right, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you so much for watching the season finale of Mets Off Day Live. And thank you for joining us all season long. Also, thank you, Jim and Andy, my fellow co-host, Michelle Margot, and all of our guests that joined us throughout the season. Enjoy the rest of your off day, Jim. Andy, we will talk to you after you get some more work done.
And Chelsea, you and Michelle did a fantastic job on this show this year. What a cool addition to our lineup, a digital lineup this was, and Sam and Jeff on the